It started as what should have been a routine segment on BBC World News. The producers had lined up a simple 5-minute interview about language diversity in former British colonies. They found their guest, Dr. Elena Reyes, a Filipino professor of linguistics from the University of the Philippines, and scheduled her for the morning broadcast. What the BBC didn't anticipate was that those 5 minutes would turn into the most watched clip in their digital history, and that their veteran anchor would become a global example of what not to do on live television. The morning of the interview, anchor James Whitmore reviewed his notes with the confidence of someone who'd conducted thousands of interviews. He was known for his sharp wit and occasionally cutting remarks. "Good morning, Dr. Reyes," James began as her face appeared on the split screen. "Thank you for joining us." "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore," Elena replied with a warm smile. "I'm happy to be speaking with you," James chuckled, glancing at his notes. "Now you're here to talk about English in the Philippines. I must say, I find it fascinating how English has evolved in different parts of the world." The way he said evolved carried a weight that didn't go unnoticed. In the BBC control room, one of the younger producers shifted uncomfortably. Elena maintained her composure. "Yes, language is always evolving. That's what makes it so beautiful." "Indeed," James said, leaning back with an expression that suggested he was about to make a clever point. "But tell me, Dr. Reyes, when you say Filipinos speak English, do you mean they speak actual English? Or is it more of a creative interpretation?" The control room went silent. It was live. There was nothing they could do now. Elena's smile didn't waver. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean by actual English, Mr. Whitmore. Could you clarify?" James waved his hand dismissively. "Well, you know, proper English. The King's English. Not to be rude, but there is a certain standard, wouldn't you agree?" "A standard set by whom?" Elena asked, her voice pleasant but carrying an edge. "Well, by the English, naturally," James replied with a slight laugh. "We did invent the language, after all." Elena nodded slowly. "That's interesting. So you're suggesting that the English have ownership over English?" "I wouldn't say ownership, but certainly authority. We are the native speakers." "Mr. Whitmore, there are approximately 70 million native English speakers in the United Kingdom," Elena said, her tone shifting to that of a professor. "In the Philippines, we have over 90 million people who speak English, most learning it before age 5. Many Filipinos speak English at home, conduct all their business in English, and think in English. At what point does speaking a language daily for your entire life make you a non-native speaker?" James blinked. "Well, yes, but you learned it as a second language. Is English not filled with borrowed words?" Eleanor interrupted gently. "Didn't English borrow from Latin, French, Norse, and German? Isn't nearly 60% of English vocabulary derived from Latin and French? So by your logic, is English itself just a creative interpretation of other languages?" The studio audience began to murmur. James's expression tightened. "That's not really a fair comparison," he said, his voice losing confidence. "Why not?" Elena asked. "You're suggesting that because we pronounce things differently, because we've adapted the language to our culture, that our English is less legitimate. But English has been doing exactly that for over 1,000 years. Why is it valid when Britain does it, but invalid when the Philippines does it?" James shuffled his papers. "I'm simply saying there's a certain way English should sound. Should sound to whom?" Elena's voice was sharper now. "To British ears. Mr. Whitmore, there are more English speakers in India, Nigeria, and the Philippines combined than in the UK and US together. If we're talking about democracy and language, the majority of English speakers have what you call an accent. So perhaps British English is the creative interpretation now." The control room erupted in whispered chaos. James tried to recover. "I don't think anyone is saying Filipino English is wrong, just that it's different." "Different is neutral, Mr. Whitmore, but your tone made it clear you mean inferior," Elena replied. "Let me ask, when you hear an American accent, do you tell Americans they're speaking creative English?" "Well, no, but when you hear an Australian accent, do you suggest they need to sound more British?" "That's not the same." "Why not?" Elena pressed. "Because they're white? Because they're Western? What you're describing isn't a linguistic standard. It's a colonial mindset. It's the belief that English belongs to Britain and everyone else is borrowing it poorly. But English stopped belonging solely to Britain the moment you colonized half the world and forced us to speak it. The audience gasped. James's face flushed red. I never said anything about colonialism, he stammered. You didn't have to, Elena said calmly. It's embedded in your questions. In the Philippines, English is an official language. We use it in our Congress, courts, and universities. Our Constitution is written in English. We produce award-winning English literature. We run call centers serving America, Britain, and Australia. And those customers understand us perfectly. The Philippines is one of the largest English-speaking nations on Earth. So when you ask if we speak actual English, what you're really asking is whether we deserve to be taken seriously. The studio fell completely silent. James cleared his throat. Dr. Reyes, I assure you, I meant no disrespect. Perhaps not consciously, Elena said, softening slightly. But that's the problem. These attitudes are so ingrained people don't realize they're being condescending. You brought me on to discuss linguistic diversity, but the moment I opened my mouth, you heard my accent and decided I needed educating about proper English. Do you not see the irony? I apologize if I gave that impression. The impression you gave is exactly what millions of Filipinos face daily. We speak excellent English. We excel internationally. But we're told our English isn't good enough because we don't sound British. Well, language isn't about sounding a certain way. It's about communication, connection, expressing ideas. And on that measure, Filipinos communicate just fine. Elena paused. Here's what you need to understand. English is no longer your language. It belongs to everyone who speaks it. It belongs to the Indian tech worker, the Nigerian novelist, the Singaporean businessman, and yes, the Filipino teacher. We've taken your colonial language and made it our own. We've enriched it, expanded it, used it to tell our stories. That's not corruption of English. That's evolution. And if you can't accept that, you're not defending the language. You're defending an empire that no longer exists. Silence. Then slowly, applause began building in the studio. It started with a few people, then more until the entire audience was clapping. James sat frozen. Dr. Reyes, you've given me a lot to think about. I hope so, Elena said simply. Within an hour, clips were circulating on Twitter. Within 3 hours, it was trending globally. By evening, the full interview had 5 million YouTube views. Filipino communities worldwide shared the video with pride. In Manila, students gathered in cafes to watch together, some tearful. For years, many had felt embarrassed about their accents. Now they felt vindicated. The BBC issued a statement. We believe in celebrating linguistic diversity and acknowledge that English belongs to all who speak it. James disappeared from social media for 2 days. When he returned, he posted a lengthy apology. I was condescending and dismissive. Dr. Reyes didn't just correct me on facts. She corrected my worldview. To Filipinos and all English speakers who don't sound like me, your English is real English. Full stop. 2 weeks later, Dr. Reyes was invited back, not for an interview, but to deliver special commentary. Language is power, she began, addressing the camera directly. For centuries, that power created hierarchies, saying some ways of speaking are legitimate and others aren't. But I want young people worldwide to know, your accent is not a mistake. Your pronunciation is not an error. The way you speak English is valid because language is about expression, not perfection. She looked into the camera. To every Filipino made to feel small because of how they speak, you are enough. Your English is enough. And anyone who tells you otherwise is revealing their own limitations, not yours. The impact spread globally. Academic institutions invited her to speak at Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, and Yale. Each time she delivered the same message. English is global now, and that means it will sound different everywhere. That's not a problem. It's a reality to be celebrated. A year later, James Whitmore produced a documentary called The Englishes, How One Language Became Many. Dr. Reyes was a primary consultant. It won awards for its honest examination of linguistic prejudice. In the Philippines, the story became legend. When young Filipinos felt insecure about their English, friends would say, "Remember Dr. Reyes?" And that was enough. Dr. Reyes remained humble. I was just tired of being made to feel incorrect, she explained. I've spent my whole life speaking English. I teach in English, I dream in English. And yet I see that look, the one that says, your English is cute. Well, my English isn't cute. It's competent, sophisticated, and mine. The most lasting impact was how Filipinos saw themselves. They stopped apologizing for their accents. They owned them. And when someone made remarks about pronunciation, they stood taller. Your English sounds different, someone might say. Yes, came the reply. It sounds Filipino, and that's exactly how it should sound. Years later, Dr. Reyes's daughter asked, Mom, when you were talking to that reporter, were you nervous? Elena thought for a moment. A little, but I was more tired than nervous. Tired of explaining, tired of justifying. Sometimes being tired makes you brave. The story became a reminder that words matter, representation matters, and standing up for yourself can change millions of lives who needed to hear. You are enough. Your voice is enough. Your English is enough. Because the best English isn't the one that sounds most British or American. The best English is the one that makes you understood, carries your ideas, and connects you to others. The BBC reporter tried to mock her English. Instead, he got an education, and so did the world.